Hi friends, this is David Packer, and this is the second of the videos on introducing culture to you. As I mentioned in the first video, culture is like an accent. Everyone has one but you, but in reality, you do have an accent, I have an accent, and we all have a culture. Our cultural values are based upon the history of the people we came from. They're developed over hundreds of years of experience, and they are shared wisdom and knowledge for that culture on how to survive. They have momentum of the past, and they're intended to prepare us for the future. Now, when we get into different cultures, we see there's a vast division in the world. There are many different values in cultures. The culture is hidden, it's in the hearts of the people. Customs are what we can see, uh, but the way people think is different. Now, let me give you the biggest division in the world. We're going to talk about that in this video. That is the West versus the rest. The West has a different way of thinking about almost everything. And the rest of the world also has a different way of thinking from compared to the West. Now, what is the West? Well, West is Western Europe, including Britain and the white population of Canada and the USA, but also including the white population of Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. Now, there are other people in those cultures that have very similar ways of thinking as Western people. And in fact, we have many who come from Africa or Asia that have immigrated to those places that have, for all practical purposes, have developed the Western way of thinking. If you're Western educated, you will also have adopted many of the Western values just by virtue of your education. By the way, doesn't mean that Western people are better than others. It's just the way that Western people think. So let me give you a broad survey of some of these things. The next video will break down some of these attributes and speak about them in more detail. First of all, they are individualistic. Secondly, intentional. Westerners are determined. They believe in delayed gratification. They believe in progress over harmony. That is, they're willing to sacrifice harmony for the sake of progress. They believe that the universe is orderly. They're more focused on guilt than on shame, although they understand both. I should say we, I'm a Westerner, we understand both guilt and shame. Westerners, we believe the physical universe is separate from the spiritual universe. That comes really from Greek philosophy from 2000 plus years ago. But we are more direct speakers than indirect. We believe that time is linear, is going a certain direction. We tend to believe that happiness is found in achievements, and happiness is found even in possessions. We tend to be materialistic. In church, we consider content over context. That is, we believe what is said is more important than how it is said. Um, we believe also in a lower power distance. That is, we hold our leaders accountable and we respect our leaders, but the distance from the individual to the leader is not so big, very short. We believe man is the master of a mechanically organized universe. We believe we can achieve our dreams, and we believe that success is earned, not given. We don't believe in luck very much. We believe that you earn your luck. You get what you want and you get what you put in life. You get back what you put in. Now, the rest of the world, and this is, of course, most of the world's population, and it's a generalization. Not everyone is exactly like this, but just a generalization of the rest. Um, as every place else, first of all, they tend to be collectivistic. Collectivistic means they identify themselves, they seek their identity more through the group than through themselves as individual. They tend to believe that fate plays a big part in the universe. They value harmony over progress. Now, both realize we need both. We need both harmony and we need progress, but they would choose harmony over progress, whereas in the West, we tend to choose progress over harmony. The rest of the world tends to be indirect communicators rather than coming directly to the point. They take a trip around the house and come in the back door, laying some hints and subtleties. They would call it artful communication. Shame plays a bigger role in their lives than guilt. They understand both shame and guilt, but shame is felt more intensely. They tend to be have a holistic view of the world, and they see a connection between the physical and the spiritual world. They don't see them entirely separate. Rather, there is a connection between what is spiritual and what is physical. They believe happiness is found in community. They believe time is cyclical, not linear, but cyclical. That is, it goes around and around. They tend to value context more than content, especially in church. So it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's not what you sing, it is how you sing it. So they value the context more, the ambience, the atmosphere, more than just what is said. A higher power distance, that is, they respect leaders. They assume that leaders will receive rights and privileges that the average person would not receive. They believe that man is just one of many other players in a mysterious universe. They believe one must accept one's fate, and they believe that success is due to luck. Now, again, that varies on the individual. If someone is Western educated, they may not hold all those values, but probably in their culture they could identify many of them. Now, let me just speak about um, one of these, and that is the issue of identification. It really is the central sticking point to understand different cultures. How do you see yourself? Well, we all can understand what it means to identify yourself as an individual and to identify yourself as a member of a nation. For example, I am me, I'm David, but I also grew up in Texas, so I can identify as a Texan. Also, I grew up in the United States, so I can identify as an American. I can identify myself professionally. I'm a minister of the gospel. I can see many ways I can identify myself. But probably, if you were to ask me who I am, I would describe myself to you as an individual. Now, one of the ways to test how people identify themselves is simply ask them to write down so many statements about who they are. Say, I am, and give me 20 statements about who you are. Now, the more statements you have, of course, the better the test is. But let's say you asked them to write 50 statements about who they are so you could understand who they are. Well, if you're a Westerner, you would probably, most of those would be about you as an individual. You'd probably put maybe 25% of them, maybe even less, about your family, about your nation. For example, I would say, well, I'm David. I'm a pastor. I'm educated. I would list all those things. Maybe if I was a little bolder, I would say I've got a good sense of humor, or I think I'm smart, or whatever. Okay, you would describe all those things. But I also may say, well, I'm an American. I'm a Texan. I'm a Christian. I'm a father. I'm a son. I'm a husband. Okay. Oh, now, see, when I say I'm a Texan, I'm really not speaking of myself individually. That would be my definition based on my group. That's collectivistic. I see myself as part of a group. If I say I'm a son, that's identifying myself as a member of a family. Well, if you ask Westerners who they are, 75% of what they'll say will be, at least 75% will be about them as individuals. If you ask a non-Westerner who they are, 50% of what they say will be about the group they came from. They'll say, in order to understand me, I am a son, I am a father, I am a whatever that nationality is. And it simply means that the West, we tend to identify ourselves as individuals. We're taught this from the very beginning. The non-West sees themselves as part of a group. And this is a tremendous difference between these two perspectives. Now, um, a psychologist by the name of Dr. Harry Triandis, and I recommend his paper. I believe the paper is called The Self and Social Behavior in Differing Cultural Context. It was in Psychological Review in 1989. I want to give Dr. Trandis credit for this. He really described the way we think, and he compared three different selves as who we are. There's, first of all, the private self. This is who you are as a person. And then there's the public self. The public self is seeing yourself in contrast to others, the public. The private self just sees you as an individual. The public self sees you as an individual in contrast to others. But then there's the collective self, which sees you as an individual in connection with the others. That is, the public self, they're over there, you're over here. But in the collective self, you're together. You're together. Now, psychologists use this word complex to describe how we think. If your mind is complex, it means you think about something a lot in layman's language. Well, he says this. He said, in families in which children are urged to be themselves, in which finding yourself is valued, or in which self-actualization is emphasized, the private self is likely to be complex. That is, you think about yourself quite a bit. Um, in cultures in which families emphasize what other people think about you, the public self is likely to be complex. Now, by the way, that can develop someone into a neurotic, worried all the time about what other people think about you. Someone said that if you don't have a little bit of that in you, you're probably a sociopath. If you have too much in you, you're probably have a mental problem. But yeah, your mother says things like, "What will the neighbors think?" And if you don't care what the neighbors think, yeah, maybe something already is wrong with you. But if you're obsessed with what the neighbors think, well, then something definitely is wrong with you. But that's the public self. Now, the collective self, here's what Dr. Tranda says. In cultures in which specific groups are emphasized during socialization, remember, you're a member of this family, remember, you're a Christian, remember, you're a Nigerian or whatever. The collective self is likely to be complex, and the norms, roles, and values of the group acquire especially great emotional significance. Yeah, well, that's what it means to grow up in a collective atmosphere, in a collective environment. That you're told that this is important, and so naturally, shame, which means you're ostracized or rejected by the group. Shame is very painful. But if you're an individual from an individualistic, excuse me, if you're from an individualistic culture, guilt is more intense. Now, both of those understand guilt and shame, but shame becomes more intense for the person from a collectivistic background, and shame and guilt is more intense from the individualistic background. Now, by the way, collectivism does not mean unselfishness. Sometimes people get those two confused. If someone's from a collectivistic culture, it doesn't mean they're not selfish. They have problems with selfishness just like everybody else does. And if you're from an individualistic society, it doesn't mean that you cannot understand teamwork, because, again, that's what you do. It's more about who you are and how you see yourself. Well, next session, we're going to be looking at some of the more different attributes of culture and trying to see the difference between that. But I hope this helps you. Thank you.